Okay, so thank you so much, Brad and Lisa. I'm so excited to be with you two today. And I
Thank
would love to start just by hearing a little bit about you two, how you got started, what you do, how long you've been doing it.
I tell
Man.
you. Okay, so
Yeah.
I say that we're always just taking one faith step at a time. That's what I
Yeah.
feel like we're doing. We launched into unrelenting pursuit at the in 2020 when no one wanted to start anything. That's when
Yeah.
we started, and really it was just an answer to well, not an answer. It was really, like I said, a step of faith into what God was calling us to, which was to really share our story and to take the we always feel so ill-equipped in everything that God calls us into.
Yeah.
But that's when we started, and really Brad works full time. I homeschool, I also do real estate. And so this
Wow.
is just ministry that's been kind of birthed out of our painful story.
Okay. I love the vulnerability. And it's funny how God uses the people who don't feel like they're qualified, right? And He's the one that
Yeah.
qualifies. I love
Yeah.
that. Okay. So, so, and do you want to dive into that a little bit deeper? What is your story and how do you help people?
Go for it, baby.
How do we help people? No, so our story into like a nutshell, because it could take a long, it could take a while. But no, our story started when we got married.
Yeah.
But in 2011, I just stepped out on my family. I started compromising a lot of my beliefs. I was just kind of living how I wanted to live. And there was infidelity. I stepped out totally on my family. And I thought that was I was growing up, that was the ultimate, marriage thing ender, right? Like that's it, you're done. And it can still considered to be that. And through it was a condensed version of what a lot of stories that we hear with infidelity and all these things. Ours was very condensed in the sense that it happened within a year time frame. Um, but just God's grace, because I wasn't chasing after God at all. By no means I even questioning, should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? I just wrote everything off and thought, that's it. We're done. We're going to get a divorce. The kids will be okay. The lease will be okay. And then I'll just keep living my life that I'm living. And, God came down and I call it my road to Damascus experience. And it was literally on the side of a road. I wasn't listening to Christian music. I wasn't praying. There was nothing to do with God at all. And He came down and met me on that road. And that started this long, long road to reconciliation, long road for me to finally put God in His true place in all of our lives, which should just be our priority. And that's it. So finally, all those things, that was the culmination of a long road, and a lot of prayers were happening during that time. And that's why all this happened. But yeah, that was a very, very condensed version.
And then it was perfect after that.
Yeah, everything. I walked in, I was like, hey, this is awesome. Yeah, no, not at all.
Started the long road. Yeah. And so that's really what we're passionate about. We really we laugh when we say that our specialty is infidelity, but because it just sounds like such a crappy specialty. But really, our heart is always for people to have a hope in what God can do in your marriage and in you. And so that's ultimately where our heart is. We do coaching, we do reboot weekends. We have a podcast, which is comes out. We try to do it every week. We're on break right now. We're about to launch again. But if anyone wants to hear just kind of a more detailed version of our story, you can go to episode 80 of that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that detail. And I appreciate you sharing, because obviously that comes from a really vulnerable place. And that is, there are a lot of people who are going through that and they don't see any hope. So to see you two now and give people hope that no matter what they are facing in their marriage, things can shift. So I think that's so beautiful. And Brad, I'm just curious, what did God say to you during
Oh yeah.
that made things start to shift?
Yeah. So I mean, I've it's such an amazing thing what God does, right? Because I I just can't stress enough. There was no, like, I pushed people away that were speaking life into me. I didn't talk to my parents. Like, there was no God in my life as far as like influence, right? There was nothing like, the song didn't come on the radio and he spoke through. No, nothing like that. I was traveling back from another weekend of doing whatever I wanted and acting like a fool.
Yeah.
And he met me, and I pulled over. I was driving back. I don't even know exactly where I was, just in the middle of nowhere. And I pulled over, and he gave me a choice. And it was the most clear, loudest, way that God speaks. Like, the heavens didn't open. There wasn't a burning bush. There was nothing audible. There wasn't this crazy, but it was the loudest thing ever. And I pulled over, and I didn't, I just sat there and broke down. And it was this choice. It was, okay, you can keep going down the path you're going, or you're not too far, you can turn back to me. And when I do tell my story, I tell people, God didn't say you can turn back to me, your family's going to be restored, you're going to be doing this, and in 10 years I'm going to put this on your heart to start this ministry, and you guys are going to walk together and podcast and all these. Nothing like that. Absolutely nothing. It was just literally, turn back to me right now, or keep going down this road that you're going. And I know it's a God of second chances. I know he is 100%. But there was this finality in that moment where I did have this ultimate choice, and I just broke down and asked for him to forgive me. And the only thing I knew to do after that was to call Lisa, because I was like, oh, this is what's broken, right? And now God's called me here. I'm trying, I want to run back to him. I know I've been stupid. Like, this is ridiculous, beyond stupid. That's, and so I called Lisa and asked her if there's any way we could, reconcile, if we can, fix this marriage. Is there any way you'll let me back? And that began that long road. And even though I had this huge moment on the side of the road, there was still the earthly consequences, right? Like, God forgave me on the side of that road, redeemed me. That was it. That's it. But detox and fighting my flesh still, and it was just a long road. It was a very long road.
Sure.
Yeah, but it was literally just this moment of, I knew he was talking to me. I knew he was there, and still giving me a choice,
Okay. Yeah. Two roads that would look very differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But like, okay. So with anything, addiction, infidelity, I mean, there's so many things that carry a lot of shame. And Lisa, what was that like for you when he reached out to you and said, hey, is there a chance? What was that like for you?
Honestly, so at this stage of the game, I mean, our marriage was completely hopeless. I had in the beginning, I really felt like God had given me this really unique glimpse into the fact that there was an opportunity to be able to work through this, which I thought I was this person who was like, there's no coming back from something like that. I never thought I would face it, but that was honestly my preconception before ever navigating through it.
Yeah.
And so I really felt that, but in our situation, Brad wanted nothing to do with reconciliation. And so we actually did walk through the entire divorce process. So when Brad did call me, it was when we talk about the fact that our feet were like in the Red Sea. That's what we felt like, because after he had called me an hour later, my attorney called and said the papers are ready. They just need to be signed by the judge. We had already signed the papers and they just needed to be signed by the judge. So it was a miracle. Like, that's what I would say. I think I didn't quite know what kind of miracle it was. And I think I had a misconception that a miracle wasn't messy. I really do. I think that I just thought a miracle was a miracle. And so that the man that had called me on that phone in that moment was going to be a transformed, changed man and would come into the door and would just boom, like we would just be able to navigate forward and it would be this non-messy process. And it's so amazing to me how God teaches us things in the middle of the miracle. And we do have to cling to him in the middle. We have to literally stand and like, okay, I'm in the middle of this miracle. And everyone wants the miracle. Everyone wants to be, 11, 12 years afterwards and be able to look back and say, look at what God has done.
Yeah.
Right. But in the middle of it, it is desperate. So it was, I think I held two worlds in my hands at that moment when he called. And it was, I knew that it was a miracle that he had called because at this point, like I said, our marriage was hopeless. But I also had no idea what that looked like. And I just was clinging so desperately to Jesus at this point that he really did give me enough clarity to recognize that I knew what the road that I was on, where it was going, what it was leading to. And at this point, I'd been walking enough months to know what it felt like to be a single mom and raising 3 kids and trying to figure out what the future of my life was going to look like. And I knew that this other road of reconciliation, that it would really be all Jesus. And I didn't know what that would take, but it was something I had prayed for. So I had enough faith to take the risk to see what that would look like.
Okay. Wow, that's incredible. And okay, so I guess I have a question for both of you. So Lisa, for you, what if someone is going through this similar situation right now? Lisa, what are the tips that you would give them to help them reestablish hope and trust and like anger, bitterness, whatever you were going through? And then Brad, shame and guilt and whatever else was coming up for you. I'm sure there's anger, whatever else. Like what do you do in those moments when you're, because you got to develop new skills, I'm sure, communication, all those things. How clinging to God, you've already said that. So what other tips would you offer people?
So our story was a little bit unique in the way that God had to navigate me through some healing long before I ever knew whether or not our marriage was going to be a part of that healing.
Okay.
So we were apart for quite a few months. And I do feel like, we do talk about all the time, like go to Jesus, go to Jesus, go to Jesus, right? Because when we can't have hope in our circumstances, there is hope in him and the future that he has for us. Even though we can't see it, we can trust that he has something good for us. Doesn't mean it's our good, like what we think, right? That's where we get really misconstrued and everything. So I often talk about the crossroads that I myself faced when it came to navigating healing. And so for me, I read a book during that time and it talked about how the enemy uses the tool of discouragement and bitterness. And in that moment, I am telling you, it was like God showed me that that is the road I was on. And it's not really my nature. Like that's not what I like to sit in, but I felt complete justification for feeling discouraged. And I felt complete justification for being bitter. Both of those things were just an easy tool to grab onto at that point.
Yeah.
And so I really like when I say that God also gave me this crossroads, he helped me to recognize that no matter what the outcome of my marriage was going to be, I did have a choice about the woman that I was going to be. And I did realize that I did not want to be a discouraged and bitter woman. I wanted to be healed and whole regardless of the outcome of my marriage. And so I recognized that I had to walk out forgiveness, not because he had asked for it, not because he had earned it, but because I had to find freedom. I really did. I had to find freedom and I had to be able to release those things. And I had to trust and hope in what my God was going to do, not in what I could so evidently see in front of me, which was like a hot wreck of burning flames of the life that I thought was going on. And so when we tell people go to Jesus, it's because of the fact that we have navigated what it looks like to walk through the wreckage and see that God is a God. Jesus does sustain you through those things. And so I could cling to him and I could walk out healing. A lot of that happened separate from Brad, regardless of what he was doing. As I was healing, he was completely doing whatever he wanted, which I'm telling you right now, for anyone who's listening to me and thinks, wow, well, that's great. She really did that perfectly. I did not do this perfectly. I was angry with God. I yelled at God. I got on my knees before him. I told him to leave me alone and not worry about me and take care of Brad. I mean, when I talk about this process, it was a very broken, when I feel like there's a visual that I like to use in the fact that I didn't realize I actually liked control till I had none. Because then I was like, oh yeah, I really like control. But when it came to my marriage and I felt like it was this really good thing, there was a level of security that I had in my future and in my marriage that I felt very justified in holding on to. So God had to teach me to surrender. Like my fists were like this, just clenched. And I was not really willing to let go of that because it was a good thing. And I felt justified holding on. And so I really feel like Jesus had to teach me to peel one finger back at a time. And I also feel like in that process of when he really did teach me what it looked like to surrender, part of that was because I could take no credit. There was no credit for what I did. There was nothing I could say that was like, I can't give you the 7 steps to magically make your husband come home. And I'm not going to try. I can tell you to go to Jesus and I can tell you to surrender and I can tell you to walk out forgiveness and I can tell you to heal. And that looks a little bit differently for every single person, but it's still a process you have to walk through no matter what, if you really want to come out on the other side being the woman that you want to be.
Yes. Well, I think just forgiveness and letting go of control and bitterness like that, if you can figure out how to do that on your own with God, that will solve a whole lot in life. So, yeah.
Certainly takes you more in the direction that you ultimately want to end up.
Yes, for sure.
Well, but to kind of piggyback on that, I think that something that if you're in this situation, something you have to realize is there's nothing you can do, absolutely nothing you do to earn forgiveness. There isn't. And so this to me was a huge deal. It was a mere image of how Jesus forgives us, right? We can't earn the forgiveness. Like I could have done all the things and still, rightfully so, Lisa's like, no, I'm not forgiving you. Like there wasn't an earning process through the whole thing. So I just want to hit on that because you said something about, that piece of it. I just want to make sure that people understand that.
Yeah.
Like if your husband or your wife is the betrayer, don't expect them to do something and all of a sudden you're like, all right, perfect, I forgive you now.
I can forgive you. Yeah.
It's not like that. It's more of just like Lisa was saying, it's more of just like, I forgive you. Like because God's telling me I forgive you, not because of me.
Yeah. And it's not dismissing the wrong. It's not dismissing the hurt.
No,
it's still something you have to walk through. And we always say forgiveness is a process. So it's usually something that you have to do repeatedly long before you feel it.
Yeah. Right. For the shame side, man, I just usually tell people to like stuff it down way deep and forget about
it. And then what?
And just live life. It's fine. No, the shame side, man, it was huge. That was definitely, there's layers to healing. And I don't think people realize that, you can, on the side of the road, I was healed, right? But God's like, hey, you chose me. Let's do this, right? Follow me, put all this stuff down and come back to me. So that was one piece. And then detoxing is another piece. But what I didn't know till years later, I don't even know exactly when it was, but it was years later that I still had so much shame on what I did. And I mean, what I tell people now, like when we're coaching people or I'm talking to, a couple or a husband, that's or wife that's on the the betrayer side, right? I just tell them they need to understand that, okay, you've put God first. Jesus is your priority. He doesn't call you to walk in that, right? There's a victory now. No matter what happens from this point on, you have victory in your life and you can't walk with shame. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that for years. And it wasn't because somebody wasn't telling me that. It was nothing like that. It was more of, I looked at it as, okay, these were my choices then. I come back to God. I come back to my wife and kids. We start repairing this marriage. But what I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life, because of my choices, I'm going to have to live with this, that I had this shame, that I did this. And I was just kind of one of those things where I was like, this is the price, mm-hmm. right? This is the price I have to pay for the rest of my life to just feel this shame. And it wasn't, it was like waves of shame. It wasn't this, I wasn't walking around, like someone's kicked me and, ran over me and all that. It was just these waves of shame that would happen. And it was, like I said, it was years later, I was doing devotions. That's something that I changed in my life too. When I made Jesus priority, I made sure that, I try to wake up and do pray, do my devotions, spend time with God before my day starts. I know some people can't do that, but find a spot. Find it so you can do it. Just find an area to do it in your life. But during one of these, I was kind of having one of those woe is me moments that is just so stupid, because I'm like, what do you mean woe is me? Like, it doesn't matter. But I was having one of these moments and I was feeling just the weight of, our kids were little and I missed, in that condensed time frame, I missed a lot. I do not envy anyone that's gone through this longer and has missed so much more if they have kids. Like, I missed a lot. Our youngest one was little baby. And they grow so fast from a little bit. I missed so much of that time, and so I would have these moments of like, this sucks. Like, I've missed these things. How's it going to affect them? The scars I've put on them, the scars I put on Lisa, how does it still affect her? How does she, if she doesn't trust me in something, what is she thinking? Like, all these crazy things. But I just kept looking at, these are the scars that I made when I made these decisions, when I walked out on my family, when I did that. And it was this epiphany from God. And he's like, stop. It's not, you have to look at those scars. They're there. Like, we don't pretend to tell people that hurt, those scars aren't there. We never pretend to say that. They are there, and they are there forever. But I had to stop. He told me I had to stop looking at them, that I made these scars and I did this. The scars are healed. And so it was this moment of God clarifying for me, like, no, I healed those. So when you see them, you see the miracle that you stepped into. You see me, not your past, not what you did. You see me. You see your kids growing, making great choices I would have never made at 16, 18, never. You're seeing these great things happening. That's because of me, God. That's because of what we did in your family. Like, you decided to step in. You put me as a priority. You started leading your family like you were always called to lead them. And this is the miracle. And so stop, beating yourself up. Stop being sad. Like, stop being like, woe is me. Like, just stop and just step into the victory and walk in that victory. It doesn't negate what happened at all. Like that. And that's something that we stress to these couples. We've worked with so many couples where you get with them and you just see the betrayer just beat. Yeah. And it's not because their spouse is beating them. It's not like getting bombarded with words and all these things. It's nothing. Majority of the time, it's not like that. It's literally just this shame, this woe is me. Look what I did, blah, blah, blah. And I've been there. I understand where they're coming from, but it's more of like, now I just want to slap them and be like, hey, look, You're here because of a miracle. Like, there's no reason, there's no fleshly reason that your wife or your husband should have let you back in the house, period. They should have booted you and walked away. There's no reason other than God's forgiveness, other than God coming down and saying, no, fight for this family. This is what I want created. Like, do this and fight for it. And so I get passionate about it because I lived in shame for a long, long time, not even realizing it. I just thought it was something I had to deal with. So.
And that's heavy to carry. That shame is heavy to carry, and it feels like it's going to be there forever, right? No, I've dealt with shame too for different reasons, obviously, but I just remember feeling like that was almost normal. Like that was just what life was going to be like. And the Bible talks about too how God's followers, they won't walk with the face of shame. So there is hope when you continue down that path. And I love hearing the transformation. Like it's nothing you did or earned, but it did transform in such a miraculous way. And shame is interesting too, because it's keeping you from seeing the miracle right in front of you. Not only that you're there, but that you get to be a part of your children's life from this point forward and impact all of that. So
yeah,
I love hearing that. So thank you for sharing so openly. Okay. So, well, tell me a little bit. You mentioned a few times that you have to detox. So talk to me about that. What does that mean and look like?
So
yeah, I think, like I said, I think when Brad came home, I really did expect to be just like this immediate transformation that was taking place. And he'll speak into this more. But I think for me during this time, no one had ever, well, first of all, we didn't actually realize that there were so many people who had navigated through this and were living marriages that were not just surviving but thriving, because you don't hear these stories being told very often. For anyone who's listening, I'm telling you, there are more people than you could imagine
absolutely,
that have navigated this road and come out on the other side, and not just continuing to live broken lives, but are healed and restored. Our God is a God of reconciliation. So you need to know that. But I think for me, it was like, this was during a time when I experienced even, I think, some more anger because of the fact that I didn't want to have to experience any more pain. And I really didn't feel like it was fair that I had to. And this was a time when I did cry out to God. There were a few times where I was like, let me go. Let me go. I didn't want to have to continue to be in a place that I felt hurt repeatedly. And, we talk very much about setting up boundaries and guardrails that you need to establish in your life. We were just learning so many of these things the hard way, which is, we always say we did everything wrong, which is why we're so passionate about getting help. And professing so much about the things that we did learn the hard way. But so I think this was even more where God was teaching me things about the waiting place. And really there was a time when he spoke to me about the fact that, as I was frustrated and angry, that the work that he was doing and Brad was like, he just reminded me of like what he was doing here and how it was meant to have so much of a greater impact. And that my job was to hold on, even when, like I said, I cried out a couple of times during this process for him to let me go. Yeah. Now you get to share.
I can talk.
Yeah.
Man, detox. So I wasn't involved in any like drugs or anything like that. I never did any of that stuff. But my detox was basically like all fleshly detox. Right? It was so when I talked about earlier where I just started compromising my beliefs, and that's when I started to slide down the slope and then step out on my family, commit adultery, and just keep doing whatever I wanted to do. Because you don't wake up, I doubt anybody wakes up out of bed and goes, okay, today I'm going to cheat on my spouse. I'm going all in. I honestly, we've never ran into that. maybe there is somebody out there, but we've never run into that because it's such a leap from what's going on, right? Even if they felt like that happened, there's probably a lot more that happened prior to that, right? Yeah. And so that's kind of where this was. I grew up in church. I knew about everything, all those things. I didn't have a rooted and grounded relationship with Christ. I didn't have my own. I just kind of was like, I didn't know back then, if you asked me, but I felt like now I was just kind of piggybacking off of what I had always known, right? And didn't have this true relationship that I have now. But my detox process was, I had to get rid of, like, I had to get out of the pornography. Like I was in it. And that's where my slippery slope started. And so it frustrates me so bad when I hear of people that are like, nah, it's okay. It's not okay. Like, oh no, that's not cheating. It's 100% cheating, 100%. And I'll argue that point to anyone who wants to argue that point to me. Like, that is adultery. That is cheating on your spouse. I don't care what you can bring whatever argument you want, but that is 100% cheating on your spouse. And that was where my slippery slope started, for sure. That, and then just staying out later and hanging out more when I was traveling. So this didn't happen while I was at home. I was traveling for work quite a bit, and I'd be gone for a few weeks at a time. And during that time, I would stay out a little later, then go back home, go back to hotel, then just go to bed, then stay out a little later. Then that progressed and progressed and progressed until, finally I'm literally, that physical line of committing adultery, right? So when I moved back in, it was a detox from, like, I was still getting, like, text messages would pop up every now and then. And so it was a detox from, like, that physical aspect of what was going on. Then it was a detox of that fleshly desire to, like, go back to pornography, which doesn't make any sense. As I'm saying this, none of this makes sense to me, but that's what it is. Like, when you come out on the other end and look back, it shouldn't make sense to you, because you're like, why in the world would I do any of that? Why would I dabble in this? So it was a detox from that. It was, if people don't realize that there is a true war going on in the spiritual realm, going on for your spirit, you are losing that battle right now. I mean, guarantee it. Because even though I said yes to God on the side of that road, then all of a sudden I was this torn battle from, like, no, I need to serve Christ, but man, I really want to do that. Like that. And it was rough. It was so hard. Lisa tried to get me into, like, some, like, church programs at church. I can't remember what it was called. And I remember, like, one day I sat in the parking lot because I'm like, I'm not going in there. And then, and then I lied because I'm like, I'm here, and I'm just going to sit in the car all night. I think I went, like, once, but I didn't seek help like I should have. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to seek help. And for sure, a pride issue. Absolutely. And I think that it's another point I would argue all the time, is that I think majority, if not all, of our sins come from pride in some way. But there was definitely a pride issue that I had going on, and the shame I was dealing with. All of that combined, I would still lie here and there. I would still, get on my phone and start looking at stuff, like, still doing these things, and just crushing Lisa and not wanting to at the same time, and not understanding why I was doing any of this. And by the grace of God, on one trip, I'm traveling and I stumble across a YouTube page of a men's ministry, like a online men's ministry. And it spoke to me. And so I just dove in head first. And it was great. And at that season of my life, that is exactly what I needed. And it was something that really helped me finally go, like, okay, I have to put this down. By doing this, I'm not disciplined. And I preach to be disciplined. By doing this, I'm not putting God as a priority. And that's all I preach now. Like, you should have no other priority. Priorities should not be plural. It is a singular word, and it should be God, period. Other than that, under that, there are different things in your life that should be, take priority over other things, but God's your priority. So all these things that I was preaching, I wasn't doing. Finally getting in that, just releasing everything to God, just laying it all down and just being like, I'm done. Like, I don't know what to do. I started memorizing scripture because Jesus combated temptation with scripture. So that's what I was going to do. So I just started to really read the Bible, like really get into it and learn and understand and pray the raw prayers. God knows what you're thinking. God already knows you're human. Just pray the prayers. Just pray them. So I really started to do that. And I don't, it's just like one of those things. It's like the slow detox, right? A week becomes a month, becomes, 3 months, becomes 6 months, becomes a year. Like all that stuff starts happening. And so then finally you're just kind of out of it. It wasn't like a cold turkey thing. It was just something that finally I was like, okay, I'm done. And I can't, it disgusts me now to even think about what I was doing. That industry is horrible industry. There's just so many things around it that I just can't believe I was, involved in it in any way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you had accountability too, which helped.
Yeah, I finally got surrounded by a group of men that were actually, strong Christian men, became accountable to them. I started becoming an accountability partner. And just in general, it wasn't like all these guys were having issues with pornography. It was different things all the time. And so growing in that and stepping in what God wants you to step into. We all have a calling. All of us have a calling. Nobody out, if someone's out there like, I don't know what my purpose in life is, open the Bible. It tells you what your purpose in life is. Everyone has a purpose, and it's the same purpose, right? The Great Commission: spread the gospel, serve Jesus. Now, during this, as I was growing in my walk with Christ, and then all of a sudden it was like, you guys should be doing this. Like, you need to step in. Lisa was already helping women. And I was kind of like in the background, like, nah.